In the pantheon of rock guitar legends, few names shine as brightly as Jimmy Page and Eddie Van Halen, each a titan in their own right, shaping the sound of modern music with their virtuosic playing and innovative approaches. At 81, Jimmy Page, the iconic Led Zeppelin guitarist, remains a towering figure in rock history, his work with the band and beyond cementing his legacy as one of the greatest to ever wield a six-string. Recently, Page has made headlines with comments that appear to pull back the curtain on his thoughts about Eddie Van Halen, the late Van Halen frontman, whose dazzling technique and genre-defining sound revolutionized rock guitar in the late 1970s and beyond. The remarks, delivered with Page's characteristic blend of candor and cryptic reserve, have sparked intense debate among fans and musicians alike, offering a rare glimpse into the mind of one legend reflecting on another. What did Page say about Van Halen, and why has it caused such a stir? To understand this moment, we must delve into the histories of both men, their contributions to music, the competitive undercurrents of their era, and the broader context of Page's comments, which some have interpreted as a subtle critique, others as a backhanded compliment, and a few as an outright exposé of Van Halen's approach to his craft. Jimmy Page's career is a cornerstone of rock's evolution. Born in 1944 in Heston, Middlesex, England, Page's journey to stardom began in his teens as a session musician in London, where his prodigious talent saw him playing on tracks for artists as diverse as The Who, The Kinks, and even Tom Jones. By the late 1960s, Page had joined the Yardbirds, a band that served as a crucible for British rock, nurturing talents like Eric Clapton and Jeff Beck before Page took the reins. When the Yardbirds disbanded, Page founded Led Zeppelin in 1968, a band that would redefine rock music with its fusion of blues, folk, psychedelia, and raw primal energy. Albums like Led Zeppelin II and IV and Physical Graffiti showcased Page's genius, not just as a guitarist but as a producer and visionary. His riffs, from the seismic Whole Lotta Love to the ethereal Stairway to Heaven, became anthems, while his use of alternate tunings, double-necked guitars, and even a violin bow expanded the instrument's sonic possibilities. Page's mystique, steeped in his fascination with the occult and his enigmatic persona, only added to his legend. Yet, by the late 1970s, as Led Zeppelin reached its peak, a new force emerged on the American rock scene. Van Halen, led by a young, grinning virtuoso named Eddie Van Halen, whose playing would challenge the established order and, some argue, shift the spotlight away from the likes of Page. Eddie Van Halen, born in 1955 in Amsterdam and raised in Pasadena, California, was a musical prodigy whose immigrant background and relentless drive shaped his singular path. With his brother Alex on drums, bassist Michael Anthony, and frontman David Lee Roth, Eddie formed Van Halen in the mid-1970s, a band that exploded onto the scene with their 1978 self-titled debut. The album was a revelation, blending hard rock's aggression with a California swagger and Eddie's jaw-dropping guitar work. Tracks like Runnin' with the Devil and Ain't Talkin' About Love were instant classics, but it was Eruption, a 142 instrumental showcase that redefined what a guitar could do. Eddie's two-handed tapping technique, inspired by but vastly expanded beyond earlier players like Harvey Mandel, created a cascade of notes that sounded almost superhuman, blending speed, melody, and raw power. His use of custom-built guitars like his iconic Frankenstrat and his innovations in amplifier design, particularly the Brown sound, gave Van Halen a sonic identity that was both futuristic and visceral. By the early 1980s, albums like Fair Warning and 1984, with its synth-driven hit Jump, had made Van Halen one of the biggest bands in the world, and Eddie a guitar hero for a new generation. Yet, despite his technical brilliance, Eddie's approach was not without its critics, some of whom felt his focus on flash and virtuosity lacked the emotional depth of players like Page. The timing of Page's comments about Van Halen, made in a recent interview, is significant. At 81, Page is in a reflective phase of his life, having spent decades navigating the highs and lows of fame, from Led Zeppelin's stratospheric success to its dissolution after drummer John Bonham's death in 1980, and his subsequent projects like The Firm, Coverdale/Page, and Zeppelin reunions, Page has always been guarded about his personal thoughts, preferring to let his music speak. Yet, in this interview, he spoke about the evolution of guitar playing, singling out Van Halen's impact with a mix of admiration and critique. According to Page, Van Halen's arrival was a shock to the system for many guitarists of his generation, as Eddie's technical prowess and showmanship pushed the boundaries of what was expected from rock guitarists. Page acknowledged Eddie's innovation, particularly his tapping technique, which he called a game-changer for its visual and sonic impact. However, Page also suggested that Van Halen's focus on speed and spectacle sometimes came at the expense of soul and subtlety, qualities Page has always prized in his own work. He recounted a story, possibly apocryphal, of seeing Van Halen perform in the late 1970s and being struck by Eddie's relentless energy, but feeling that his solos, while dazzling, lacked the narrative arc of a great blues-based player like B.B. King or even Page himself. It was like watching a fireworks display, Page reportedly said. Beautiful, explosive, but you're not sure what it's saying. These comments have ignited a firestorm among fans, particularly because they seem to contrast two fundamentally different approaches to guitar playing. Page's style, rooted in the blues and folk traditions, is about texture and storytelling. His solos, like those in Since I've Been Loving You or Dazed and Confused, are journeys, weaving light and shade, tension and release. He's a master of restraint, knowing when to hold back and when to unleash, often using the studio as an instrument to layer sounds and create atmospheres. Van Halen, by contrast, was a maximalist, his playing a celebration of excess, fast, loud, and unapologetic. His solos were less about storytelling than about pushing the guitar to its limits, whether through blistering runs, harmonic squeals, or dive-bombing whammy bar effects. To Page's generation, this could feel like a departure from the emotional core of rock, a shift toward athleticism over artistry. Yet, to younger players and fans, Eddie's approach was liberating, a rejection of the old guard's rules in favor of a new, boundaryless vision of what rock could be. Page's remarks, then, are less about Van Halen's talent, which he clearly respects, and more about a philosophical divide in how guitarists approach their craft. The context of the late 1970s and early 1980s is crucial to understanding Page's perspective. By the time Van Halen emerged, Led Zeppelin was grappling with internal struggles, Bonham's alcoholism, Plant's personal tragedies, and Page's own battles with heroin addiction. The punk movement had dismissed Zeppelin as bloated dinosaurs, and new wave and disco were reshaping the musical landscape. Van Halen, with their youthful energy and radio-friendly hooks, represented a fresh wave, one that could appeal to both hard rock fans and a broader pop audience. For Page, watching this shift must have been bittersweet. Led Zeppelin's influence was undeniable. Van Halen's early sound owed a debt to Zeppelin's heavy riffs and swagger, but Eddie's guitar heroics were stealing the spotlight. There's a story, often repeated but never fully verified, that Page and Van Halen met backstage at a concert in the early 1980s, where Page complimented Eddie's playing, but advised him to dig deeper into the blues to find his voice. Whether true or not, the anecdote captures the tension between the two. Page, the elder statesman, urging the young phenom to prioritize feeling over flash. Fans of both guitarists have taken Page's comments in wildly different ways. On platforms like X, Zeppelin devotees have praised Page for calling out Van Halen's supposed lack of depth, arguing that Eddie's technical wizardry, while impressive, often overshadowed his songwriting. One user posted, "Page is right. Eddie could play circles around anyone, but where's the heart? Stairway makes you feel something. Eruption just makes your jaw drop." And conversely, Van Halen fans have accused Page of jealousy, pointing out that Eddie's innovations inspired countless players, from Randy Rhoads to Steve Vai, while Zeppelin's later albums, like In Through the Outdoor, felt dated by comparison. "Jimmy's just mad Eddie made the guitar cool again," one ex-user wrote, "tapping greater than violin bows any day." The debate has even spilled into music forums, where guitarists have dissected Page's and Van Halen's techniques, comparing their use of scales, phrasing, and dynamics. Some argue that Page's critique misses the point. Eddie's soul was in his joy, his infectious energy, and his ability to make the guitar sound like a living, breathing entity. Page's comments also raise questions about the nature of legacy and influence. Both he and Van Halen were innovators, but their impacts were different. Page's work with Led Zeppelin created a blueprint for hard rock and heavy metal, influencing bands from Black Sabbath to Tool. His production techniques, like recording drums in a stairwell for When the Levee Breaks, were groundbreaking, and his eclectic influences, blues, folk, Indian music, gave Zeppelin a depth that transcended genre. Van Halen, meanwhile, reshaped the guitar itself, inspiring a generation of shredders and pushing manufacturers to rethink instrument design. His tapping technique became a staple of 1980 metal, and his gear innovations, like the Floyd Rose tremolo system, are still industry standards. Yet, Page's critique suggests that innovation alone isn't enough. For him, the guitar must convey something deeper, a connection to the human experience. His perspective aligns with Page's own playing, which, even at its most aggressive, carries a sense of mystery and emotion. The timing of Page's remarks, years after Van Halen's death in 2020, has also sparked controversy. Some fans feel it's unfair for Page to critique Eddie now, when he can't respond. Eddie's later years were marked by personal struggles, alcoholism, cancer, and band tensions, but also by moments of brilliance, like Van Halen's 2007 reunion tour with David Lee Roth. His death at 65 was a gut punch to the music world, prompting tributes from peers like Joe Satriani and Slash, who called him the Mozart of rock guitar.